I want to turn the floor over to the appropriate person.
We had hoped to start with,
Is that Aioli?
no, we hope to start with finance because of the anticipated debt. We thought finance would take more time, so we hope to start with finance, if that's acceptable.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So let me call the Joint Finance and Development Committee meeting to order. And let's just take a quick roll call of commissioners here and test audio as we go. So I'm seeing Commissioner Ansari here. Can you unmute and test audio?
Here.
Oh, sorry, that was Kay Bowers, right?
Yes.
Okay. Please remute if you're not speaking. We're getting a lot of background noise. Commissioner Coleman.
I'm here.
Thank you. We can hear you well. Commissioner Ansari, let's try again.
I'm here.
Excellent. Commissioner Campbell. Hi.
Hi, I'm here.
Excellent. We have you on video. This is great.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm a part of the crew now.
Welcome to Public Affairs. Yeah. Commissioner Purcell. We hear you. Sometimes, oh, there we go.
Let me check on my computer audio, but I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Something's going on where I think you have both audio connections set up. So hopefully Commissioner Purcell will figure that one out. Commissioner Batts, are you with us today?
Commissioner Batts will not be here today. She has a family event.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for the update. All right, so with that, we can turn to the first item, unless we need to give Saul the floor. Saul, would you like to say anything about how our meeting is going today?
I appreciate that, Emily.
I mean, it does seem like an order of business now, so.
A couple of things. This meeting is being held pursuant to the governor's executive order regarding virtual meetings. We do find that it is to conduct essential business of the agency. The meeting is available to the public and will be recorded, and so will be on YouTube at a later date. And one other item is that, out of abundance of caution, Kay, this is going to be a little awkward, but it may make sense for you not to participate in the rental assistance portions of the budget and maybe community development based on the letter that we received earlier in the waiver. So, if you can not talk, not discuss that portion of the budget, I think that would be helpful. I think you can't vote for the budget as a whole or vote against the budget as a whole. So a little awkward. I think that's probably the most conservative way to go.
Unmute. So I did mark some questions on the spreadsheet about that. Should I just direct those to Director Harbison?
Yes, outside of the meeting will be prepared. That would be the way to do it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we received the budget, and I just want to give a little bit of background because I think, especially for some new board members, we have an incredibly complex budget, and as you all saw from the audit this year, incredibly complex financials. And I would like to thank Commissioner Ansari and the staff because I think that they really took our comments and desires to heart and really tried to give us a more simplified and narrated budget for the year. And so I want to thank everyone for their efforts on that. I think we are absolutely in the right direction with how this was presented. to make sure that not only board members can follow what is going on, but that we are also able to provide information to the public in a way that is more consumable. And so with that, I'd love to turn the floor over to Jim or Melinda. I don't know who's presenting first.
Well, it will be the Jim and Melinda show, along with Jonathan Craycraft, who's the deputy in finance. I'd first like to thank, again, Commissioner Sari for his advice and counsel. We've done our best to incorporate that as a straw man and an approach going forward in this fiscal year. Especially like to thank all the property managers. Our 19 property managers worked very hard on this since really April. The senior property managers, affordable housing, each of the directors has worked very hard. All of those have been reviewed. The chief development officer, the chief operating officer, the deputy executive director, and most importantly, I personal thanks to Melinda Hatfield and Jonathan and the entire finance. They put all the templates together. They've shepherded this process. There's been a lot of discussion on how to make this work the best way possible, both in presentation, but most importantly in substance. So there's been a long team effort, and you'll see, I hope, a product that will more clearly portray for you the status of the agency. So you should have received, and we worked this out, we're working until late to make sure it was clear. You should have received an overview document of 2 pages from me, followed by an entity-wide basic spreadsheet that lists a lighter breakdown of the budget, and then Melinda's more detailed write-up, followed by slides we can use as metrics going forward. And then late yesterday, the budget detailed, which is the document we typically, in the past, it's the only document we provided, is the detail by major category. So with that, I'd just like to stop and make sure, does everyone have those to work off of today? And did you receive them? If not, we need to pause and we'll certainly hustle and get them to you. All the commissioners and Saul have that? Does anyone not have it? Let's just make it a negative. Anybody not have it? Okay, good. Then we'll start with my document, which is an overview of the agency. Basically, our goal was to explain the major sources of income, what our expenses are that are operational, what our target goal is for the overall agency for the net operating income, which is the operating expenses that we have some control over, some of which we do not have control over. For example, program incomes that are required to go out. But those that we have control over, that would be the target for management and the staff. And then those fixed expenses that don't change much year over year, that you can't control, leading to what we believe will be the cash left over at the end of the fiscal year and subject to the audit, be available for distribution into our development program in fiscal year 2022. So then the income, we really, as I described here, there's really 3 major components of our income. I'll touch on those. The first are the federally subsidized payments we receive for rental assistance, both in our housing assistance payment contracts. There are 22 of those for each of the properties. Those are the RAD resulting contracts that were completed in December. The last one was completed December of last year. We're now in a contract under the Project-Based Rental Assistance Program, the Multifamily Division of HUD, a separate financial program. And in that program, we receive an adjustment for inflation each year. These contracts all start at different times in the year based on the point in time when the individual site converted from public housing to under RAD to the project-based rental assistance. And I offer that context, and that gives us great confidence in the amount of money we'll receive in the federal fiscal year, because those contracts, being contracts, have to be honored, and we already know what those values are. So those funds is one major portion of it. That's our bricks and mortar. And the other one is our is our housing choice voucher, our voucher program, which is our largest program. I won't touch on it other than to mention we are in shortfall. We're in monthly workout meetings with HUD based on the large number of people who've lost their jobs that are in vouchers. We have recertified well over 1,100 families. None of them are going to lose their homes. And I'm very happy to report that HUD funded us this month, and they're going to fund us next month to carry us through the fiscal year. Based on their projections, we run a 2-year tool, very complex financial model that Norman runs that we check every month. And based on those projections, we're confident of the values we received from HUD going forward in the fiscal year. So those are our two major components, two of the three. Those represent about 78% of the income for the agency. The other major income are pretty straightforward. That's what we get from our residents, both in our project-based rental assistance, where they pay 30% of their income, our workforce housing, which we don't have a lot of numbers yet on that one, but we're growing as we develop mixed income, and our market rate properties. Now, to give a sense, though, of the impact and importance of HUD to us, we would not be receiving much of this tenant income if it were not for the HUD program that the tenants are assigned into, like vouchers and like our project-based rental assistance. So while we say 78% is a direct result of federal transfers into our accounts as part of our income, easily 85% of our tenant income that comes in is supported by and influenced by and enabled by the federal subsidy. So our total income we anticipate next year for the fiscal year of $150 million. You see the exact numbers in your write-up. We're confident those revenues are going to be there, and we're planning to use them appropriately. If there are any questions on revenue, I'll pause, but that's the three major categories.
Jim, I do have a question, and I just really want to get this right for myself. And I think I got a little confused by the two different narratives, but I really want to make sure that I understand what into rental income versus the HAP income. So is it correct, HAP income, that is basically the income for the voucher program, and does that also include PBRA?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I understand the question. We have tenant rents. Is that, you're asking what's in tenant rents? Is that the question?
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand. So when we're talking about the total rental income line item, more detailed budget, sorry, I'm using the terms from the detailed budget page to make sure I'm understanding what composes our income line. And then we have total HAP income. My understanding, does that make sense, Jim?
Yeah, I got it. So the total rental income, Jonathan or Melinda chime in, that's what tenants pay out of their pocket, either by check, money order, whatever. That's 27 million. And our tenants include people who hold vouchers. So you pay 30% of your income if you hold a voucher. You may pay $200 a month. Oh, excuse me. We do not get that. That goes to the landlord. That's only the income we get at our properties. So that's Sudicum, Napier, Edge Hill, all of our properties. The tenant pays us rent down to a minimum of $25. They pay us at least $25 up to 30% of their income for their apartments. That also includes the LIHTC properties managed by Freeman Webb, as well as commercial real estate, which is not a very large part of the portfolio, but we have the parking garage revenue. We have the Rise Biscuits and the Corner Pub as an example in our commercial.
The ground leases at Rolling Mill Hill.
And we have ground leases at Rolling Mill Hill as well. So, but it is actual money we receive from tenants under lease agreements, the majority of which are individual tenants that live in our apartments.
This is Paulette. I have a question also about the tenant rents. How does it break out in terms of PBRA, workforce, and market rate? Could be percentage, actual dollars. I'm just curious.
We can get that for you. We typically don't present that, but it's the vast majority, over 90%, well over 90% of our income comes from project-based rental assistance tenants in our existing properties. Our market rate and workforce are largely in our Envision properties, which are just now coming online. We do have some market rate in the Hope 6 properties, but none of those have more than 20% of the apartments in market rate. So and most of our portfolio is PBRA pure. It has no market rate in it. All of our towers, for example, are complete PBRA. So it's a very high percentage, 90% plus. We can get those exact figures for you, I think, when you get it.
That's okay. It gives me an order of magnitude. And so it's roughly the 10% remaining or less than 10% remaining is divided between workforce and market rate tenants.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jim. So then under the HAP income, that is where our income for our vouchers and our project-based rental assistance from the federal government comes in, along with the admin dollars that then we, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you. That was really helpful.
Okay. So moving on to my narrative, trying to keep it broad. Under operating, we anticipate 131 million roughly in total operating. Vast majority are direct program costs. That's voucher payments to landlords, the community development grants, so CDBG and home funds, which next year we anticipate to increase relatively significantly due to an influx of CARES funding for the COVID crisis. We have old properties, so 28 million in maintenance and utility costs for our properties. Even though we are modernizing and pursuing the eviction program, we have a large inventory of apartments built in 1937 and 1961 that require a lot of love and care, and that's a large expense for us. And the 26 million administrative costs, that's virtually all employee salaries and benefits, and this represents 90% of our operating expenses. That leads an NOI, net operating income of 18 million roughly, which is our financial goal for 2021 in the areas we control. And I'll pause for a moment. And then moving on to our fixed expenses, these are the ones that don't change much year over year. I spent a few sentences talking about capital needs, because we always are asked, is our program sustainable? Will we be able to sustain the apartments we have in inventory now in their current condition for the future? And the answer is yes, it's virtually indefinitely. Melinda gave you a more exact figure on our escrow balance for repairs. It's 50,650,000. So we're close to 51 million in total across all of our properties. And those exist as long-term repair items. HVAC units, or we have to replace roofs, membrane roofs in our towers. We have to do a replacement on our solar energy program or our geothermal energy programs. Those are for the big fixes, and we are well covered. And that program was established by not us, and we do look at our properties. We update each year based on what the property managers think. But we base this on a third-party assessment of the entire inventory that established the contributions on an annualized basis and the initial contributions into the fund. So 5,568,000 next year into the accounts. There'll be a withdrawal that's programmed in across the properties as those needs come up. It's managed largely by Will Biggs and Affordable Housing, and that allows us to maintain the properties as they are now over a long period of time. 5 million of our fixed expenses are debt service payments. We've taken on debt in a variety of places, but 10th and Jefferson, Kirkpatrick Park, Hospital 1, 2, 3, and 4 as they come online. We anticipate some of this is anticipatory, but the debt service payments will be in the future based on the pro forma analysis as we close the debts that will come next year. And these are simply debt service payments. Typically, when you mention debt service, is a question, do all the properties cash flow? They do. So we structure every property in our development to make sure that there's cash flow. In other words, after you pay your debt service, there's money left over. After you pay your fixed expense for reserve for repair and your operating expenses, there's still money left over in cash flow. We design these programs to be we're pretty conservative in that regard. But these are our fixed expenses to pay debt service. And last, the 2.5 million are our insurance costs under our general liability and property insurance, as well as essentially our property tax payment. We have a payment in lieu of taxes, pilot tax that we pay to Metro government under a cooperative agreement. And Linda will cover that detail, but that's the 2.5 million. So coming off the net operating income, you remove our fixed expenses, and we anticipate roughly 5.5 million of positive cash flow through the fiscal year. We'll show the slides later. We typically beat this. This is a pretty conservative projection, and we intentionally are conservative. We do not want to project a positive number and then use it for planning later in development and find out we're wrong. So we are relatively conservative in our budgeting, and there is we anticipate we will meet this and frankly beat it, and we'll cover those slides that Ailey helped us craft on where we are currently our budget. We're about $1 million plus over budget right now in terms of actual performance on this year's budget. So we are very confident we'll meet this number.
Jim, can I ask a quick question right here before you jump ahead? On the capital needs budgets, are those capital needs projections estimated per site? So like for Andrew Jackson Courts, the oldest one, you would have a higher, okay.
Absolutely. And then projected out, I got to look, it's at least 15 years. I think it's 20. The original assessment was a 20-year run. I think they're all projected 15 years out. And it's a rolling 15. So, this year we'll use up some of the money that's already planned. We'll have a plan for 15 years from now as we project for each property. We do that as part of the budget process. We look at the capital needs, what needs to be released. And this is, frankly, a pretty conservative figure in that sometimes, we estimate our heat pumps, for example. We plan on a 12-year replacement. The warranty's 15, and they often sometimes go 17. But we plan at 12 to replace them. But if they don't break, if they're not in trouble, we don't replace the heat pump, right? We sit on the money a little bit longer. So these, again, are conservative projections for the capital needs for the properties. And I think my goal here is to give you confidence that we're in good shape, that each property has its own separate escrow account tailored to the site, to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
I'll finish up just as a topic of discussion. I was able to call most of you. I didn't get to everybody before for this meeting, and I apologize. We just, I think, scheduling issues. It was not intentional to not get to anyone, but I think I got to Kay and Bishop Campbell and Antoinette and Emily. We talked, and board chairperson I talked, and for Commissioner Coleman, I'm sorry. I know Latonia's going to get us together, and hopefully we can bring detailed questions. We can answer those, but I want to include the benefits for our employees. And talent retention is one of our top leadership goals. You've got good people, you want to keep them. So that last paragraph, I just want to make sure the board was aware that the budget includes all the step increases, all the longevity increases, 13% contribution without a match into the Vanguard account, as well as a tremendous health and dental plan, a choice between Blue Cross Blue Shield or Cigna, with 4 slices, 4 types of programs in each. And there's no increase in premiums for any employee this year. And in addition, with inflation running roughly 0%, as I said in my email, we're recommending a 1.5% pay raise. And I included a memo that showed the pay raises over the last 5 years. We've worked every year to take care of our employees and to give them a real pay raise, not just something for cost of living. That's already baked into the personnel policy. The step increases and longevity pay account for inflation. We've worked every year to give a substantial, reasonable, good pay raise, and this year we're recommending 1.5%. We looked at other numbers, but this one will allow us to preserve enough cash flow year over year projected that we can have those funds available for development. So I said the line that we anticipate no negative impact to long-term plans, including development and our envision plans. That's kind of the balance you have to strike with this. We've got great employees. They're tremendous. They are, this is a tough time for everyone. And so we hope that you will see the wisdom of following through on this. And this is almost a complete pay raise. It's 1.5% full pay raise. There's really no inflation estimated by the Department of Labor from last year. It's 0.1%. So it's near 0% inflation. So this is a real pay raise. And that's my summary. Melinda has a comparative analysis year over year to follow, and any detailed questions. I'll leave it to her. She chooses to do it. You may want to work off the detailed sheet.
Right.
So I'll leave it to you on that. Typically, we only give you the detailed sheet, but we try to give you a better insight of a roll up and then breaking down the pieces below it. And subject questions, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Jim. Before we move on and have more questions for Melinda, I just want to open the floor for commissioners on comments or questions.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I apologize for being so informal here, but I am in day 7 of quarantine. I was diagnosed with I tested positive for COVID-19 last Friday. So this would be almost day 5, 6, 7 of the process. So I am one of the people who are asymptomatic, no temperature, no fever, no coughing, no shortness of breath, no presented asymptomatic. I simply got tested because I had planned to go home this weekend to see my parents who were 72 and 78. So I said, let me go and get tested just so I can make sure there's peace of mind with a negative test. I got a positive test, so there's still peace of mind that I didn't go. No sad and no hard stories here. So I apologize. I am sitting in a hotel quarantining away from my family who all tested negative. Who all tested negative. So I am in a hotel in a t-shirt and shorts for the next couple days. So again, I apologize for the informality, but I first want to start by saying thanks, Jim, for I think really preparing a much more simplified process. I like to reiterate what Emily said, is that we think this is a good start towards really kind of sort of summarizing. And I think there's probably a few more things that we can do. And I really feel, and again, I can't speak for everyone on the board. I felt like we just spent a really good 30 minutes understanding what the budget really is. And if we continue to improve the way we present it and the expectations, that this need not be a 2-hour presentation every time we go through this, because I think if done properly, we can absorb this information in less than an hour in this. And so we'll continue to try to do that. There are a few there are a few suggestions that I might have in order to kind of sort of even make this even more where you're actually getting a comparative and the new budgets all at the same time. So it requires less flipping back and forth to try to tick and tack and tie. But I think this is an excellent first step forward. So thank you, Jim, Melinda, and the rest of the staff for hopping to this.
Thank you, Aoli. I wasn't sure if you had done some home renovations for your background. Yeah, so I'm so thankful to hear that you are asymptomatic, and it speaks to the importance of testing with your story. Any other questions or comments for Jim related to what we've seen so far? I think you're on mute, Paulette.
I also would like to say how simpler and more easily graspable the financial condition of the agency was from this particular presentation, and kudos to all of those who were involved in making it so, and to those who raised the questions initially and then said, well, let's sit down and get together to make it happen. So thank you all, and I think we're on the right track.
Okay, great. So with that, I think, Melinda, if you want to take the floor, please do.
So Emily, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Assuming the board members are comfortable, right? Let's ask ourselves the question is that, will there be additional information presented that changes our perspective on the numbers that I've sent, as opposed to, because I think that's what we're trying to get to, is to try to figure out how to present it in a way that people can easily grasp coming into it, and making it less of a one-way download of information. Let us get the information simple enough for us to grasp with a short summary. And then if we do have questions, then respond. Because there may not be any questions and we could save an hour.
I think could I just speak to that, Aoli? I think Melinda, in her portion, she was going to cover comparative budgets from previous years. So that's very helpful for me. And I had a couple of questions around that part of the presentation. It won't take long. It's just a couple of questions.
I also would like to hear Melinda's presentation, and maybe moving forward, after I'm more comfortable with what is presented, we may be able to get to your point, Aoli, and I'm glad you're doing well.
Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I'm sharing the big microphone with Mr. Harbison. So, and Jonathan's going to be driving the presentation. The memo that I prepared was a more detailed line by line, just kind of give you an overview of what was in each line on the income and expense. I know a lot of the information that I have in my memo mirrors what Mr. Harbison has in his cover memo. So I won't go over the first couple of pages again, unless there's any specific questions. What I would like to talk about is, if you want to pull up the big slide. Yeah, we're going to share the kind of the roll up of the individual columns that makes up the total entity budget. I'm not showing.
Melinda, do you have a slide up?
We're trying. Hold on just a second. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
There it is.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So page 3 and page 4 of my memo kind of went over I'll go over the budget notes by program to get to the total column before we kind of get into the comparison slides. Just briefly want to talk about this and how we came to these numbers. The first column obviously is our central office cost center total. It is the executive finance, affordable housing directive office, the strategic planning, construction, recap, IT, HR. So that all encompasses the central office cost centers and our. So what happens there is that mainly it's salaries and office expenses, and we are funded. The cost center is funded completely by management fees, fee-for-service income for our legal department, and other program income that we get from the affordable housing site, any surplus cash that we need to zero out our budget, developer fees from all the projects, the construction projects that are going on, LIHTC deals, and then any little other income, interest income. So that really covers the central office cost. So we just need to make sure that we understand that that the central office cost center is funded by these funding sources. The next column is the MDHA service crews, and this is what we're calling them. I know there's been several different titles for the crews, but it's the construction crews that MDHA employs to help Will and his group with affordable housing type construction needs and preventative maintenance needs at the sites. We have a plumbing crew, an HVAC crew, a carpentry crew, a pest control crew. So they work exclusively for the affordable housing properties. So their fees, they charge a fee for service for the work that they perform to the properties. And so they are funded exclusively from those fees. And mainly their costs are maintenance expenses. So it's an employee and salary and fringe. The next column is what Mr. Harbison had discussed earlier, commercial leases and other business activities. The two things that are in this column are the downtown parking garage. And with the COVID-related struggles that our garage has had downtown, we are still being able to project a break-even budget because we do still have the monthly parkers, and and SP Plus manages that garage for us, and they have been really thinking out of the box on ways to create revenue in this time, especially downtown with what's going on. They are contracting with the construction workers downtown to try to get the parking garage daily, the transient parking up for parking, like I said, for the construction workers that are working downtown, offering reduced rates to get it filled. So right now we're projecting a break-even budget. So the $653,000 that's projected for the net income after expenses is from the money that we receive at Rolling Mill Hill for the ground leases at Rolling Mill Hill. So that'll go into the money that Mr. Harbison, the $5.4 million. And then, of course, we've got, and I know Mr. Harbison has talked about in depth about the affordable housing properties. We roll that into one column, and that includes LIHTC properties that MDHA manages. So we're projecting after expenses of $3.8 million for those properties. The Freeman Webb managed properties, our agreement with them is such that the budgets are not required until probably the middle of August. So what we did with the Freeman Webb managed properties, we used the budget in actual, we looked at actual for this year and used the budget to actual comparison, kind of projected out and used kind of an estimate of what we project for the budget for next year. So when we get those true numbers, we'll probably present that back or spam it out to everybody just so we know the exact numbers that Freeman Webb is projecting for next year. But right now, we left it at pretty close to what it was last year, about $945,000. And then the other three columns that make up the entity-wide are the rental assistance program with the vouchers. We project a break even for that because HUD usually, like Mr. Harbison talked about on the shortfall, whatever HAP expenses, as long as we stay within our budget authority and our lease up rates, then HUD normally will make us whole on that. So we're projecting for HAP of $52 million this year, or for next year for landlord payments, and then about $5 million in other revenue and grant revenue for admin expenses. So we're projecting a break-even budget for them. Community development is completely funded from the grants that they receive, and we'll talk about this on the comparison. Their column has increased significantly, about $13 million this year, due to the CARES Act funding that we got just here recently. So we're projecting that out for the next year, about $13 million plus. And then urban development is funded basically from the TIF admin fees that we get each year from Metro, from the handling all the debt service requirements for the TIF loans that we have. So they've got about $1 million revenue and expense. So they zero out. And then, so we come to a subtotal, just kind of we talked about this last year, and then we have a column where we have interagency elimination fees, where, like I talked about, the example is the fee for service income that's showing up in central office and our service crews. That gets charged out to the sites. So that's work that's performed for the affordable housing properties. So that number gets eliminated, the revenue and the expense down below, to get to our true budget numbers, which is what Mr. Harbison had discussed earlier, the totals. Just kind of wanted to go through this individual detail of what makes up the one column of the total entity budget for the year. Is there any questions on any of these columns, or before we get into the comparison?
Yeah, I got a couple questions, and they may be for Jim and for Will. So on our roughly 6,000 or so units that are inside of our portfolio, do we do 100% of all maintenance requests around plumbing, HVAC, electrical, for which we carry roughly a kind of sort of million? I guess the question I'm asking is, do we do 100% of our kind of sort of maintenance activities internally?
No, we don't. We do most of them internally. Now that doesn't include the Freeman Webb properties. They handle all the maintenance of the properties they're in the contract to manage. The property managers have the latitude to outsource to local contracted firms where necessary. But each site has a maintenance supervisor, maintenance technicians, senior technicians, and the goal is to handle as much in-house as possible. But for example, if it's just a large number of units to turn all at once, they then have the option of bringing in additional labor or tapping into the construction company called here the service crews for assistance. But up to capacity, they do everything they can internally. But obviously, sometimes on volume, they're not able to do that.
One of the major things in the maintenance expense too is like landscaping and groundskeeping.
Right.
So that's an expense that we contract out. And painting, we don't have a painting crew, so we have a lot of painting and flooring. things like that, that we contract out, so that are in the maintenance line.
And as an example, though, we do have groundskeepers, not a lot, that do some of the groundskeeping work, but most of that is outsourced. Maintenance techs are qualified to paint, and they do, repair drywall and touch-up paint. And when we turn units, sometimes they do the painting and the flooring themselves. But it's a balance, and each site is a little bit different depending on its age and the needs of the site. What you do at Casey is different than what you do at Johnny Rehale.
Right. And so Jim, from a dollar value, how much do you say are we doing internally versus what we're doing externally, or what we're doing third party?
I'd say probably 70% in-house and 30% out. That's a swag. We have Jones Lang LaSalle right now conducting a survey of our entire maintenance concept to get details on that and to see what we can do to improve. They started about maybe a month ago, and they're studying our entire maintenance program and how best we can train our techs to do more in-house if needed, and what the options are to be the most cost efficient in maintenance support. It's probably 70-30 if I had to guess about it. Will, do you got a feel for this? Will Biggs, are you on? I think Will's on. He may not be on the call. Yep. But let me check. We do most of it here. Now, right now it's different because we're only doing emergency maintenance and unit turns. So our preventive maintenance program right now has been held in abeyance for about 4 months. So our preventive maintenance, where we inspect apartments and do PMs to get ahead of the game, we're not doing any of that right now because of COVID. But in normal times, I'd say 70-30 is a good split. And right now, as we discussed in the COVID, most of our maintenance guys are working 48 hours. They work Monday through Saturday, one half shift does, and then the next week they work one half. So some of that may be a little bit more heavily on the contracts right now for some of this work.
So Jim, can I ask you to follow up on this? And here's my frame of reference. So I look at the total maintenance expenses. That if I look at the column for MDHA service crews, that number is $1.649 million. But I look 2 line items over, and it suggests that we're spending $16 million a year in maintenance. And I'm only isolating that 2 numbers. I'm not even looking at the $10 million that's above it and trying to figure out where that $10 million in administrative expenses are versus that. But it feels like, just looking at those 2 numbers, and I'm happy to be 100% incorrect, it feels like we're spending a lot of money on third-party services from looking at those 2 line item numbers, but we're carrying a fair amount of personnel for a relatively light lift compared to the total maintenance budget. And so I might have expected to see that our maintenance expenses would be super high inside of our internal side if we were doing all of the maintenance, 70% of the maintenance ourselves, right? But those numbers seem to suggest that we're spending a lot of money on third-party stuff, and we're carrying, and there may be internal overhead it's not taking enough work from the third party in that. And so that's what I'm looking at, is really saying, that's the question I'm really asking, is, are we getting true value? Because it appears we're only doing 10% of the work and 90% of it is being outsourced.
So just a couple of things I'm going to chime in. First of all, on the 16 million number, that includes the salaries of all the maintenance staff at the properties, correct?
Right, and employee benefits, right?
And employee benefits. So that skews your number to a degree. That's all the salaries. And then the 1.6 million, that's our internal construction company only. That doesn't break out third-party contracts. So those are all full-time employees. We have 3 carpenters. We have 2 pesticide that are always busy, plumbers. What else is in that group? A construction mechanic. Right. Mm-hmm. We do all of our vehicle, our 78 vehicles. We do all our vehicle maintenance in-house with a mechanic, breaking tires, doing all the PMs, et cetera. So we'll get a better feel for that, though, and I'll give you a better reading. But okay, as an example, if you got to pull the salaries out, you're not able to outsource and compare in a comparative model, and those salaries are rolled up in that number.
That's right. And so what I'm very interested in to see, Jim, is the value of salaries against the work being provided. Like that's the real comparison. It's not how much in salaries we have, but if we're carrying $10 million of salary to do $5 million of work, I'd be like, should we be doing that? If we're saying we're carrying $10 million of salary because we're doing $50 million of work, I'm like, oh, wow, that feels really good, right? Because it's all relative to what third party is willing to do it for. So that's the real question I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, if I may, what I'd like to do is put that in Jones Lang LaSalle's inbox. I think they can give us a pretty granular, that's what they're doing now. I'm not sure we framed the question specifically that way, but if it's not overly time sensitive, they're doing a third party study. We could get a real good look from them on how you do a comparative analysis of in-house work versus the cost of outsourced work and see how we stand now.
I'll write the question because we should have the best information. We should go back to 2020 and we should be able to say, this is how much money we spent on third-party services.
And we can do that. We have the contract rules. Yeah, we can do that.
Right? And we should compare that to the value of the services we put in place. And it should be all in our budgets in previous periods. It should just be a simple comparison, not a study.
Yeah.
Right. It may be worthy of a deeper conversation. We'd also have to compare work order value that's done by the in-house staff versus work order value outsourced. I mean, that's part of this analysis, I think. So, and there's certain things, for example, we don't fix roofs. Our insurance doesn't let us put a man on a roof. So those things we just have to pull out. But we can pull the contract page, right? Okay. So let me take that, see what we can get and we've got all the 2020 data almost in. So we're in month
we can
11,
project out.
and we can project out 1 month. Okay, I got it. Let me see what we do to get Scott.
So Jim and Melinda, will you be able just to show the amount that's outsourced, the percentage that's outsourced in the current year?
Yeah.
Right. What makes up maintenance, the main areas of maintenance is, of course, the salary and fringe for the maintenance staff at the sites, and then material costs, any material costs that they buy for the, any kind of tools and materials, plumbing materials, whatever they need, and then the outsourced contracts. So those are the biggest items that make up the maintenance expense. So yes, and the crew and whatever the crews charge internally. But we can break that out. We can get that detail for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the roll up? If not, we can get to the comparison slides if you guys are okay with that. Okay. Jonathan's going to share it on the screen. I know you have it in front of you too, but just for everybody's. So the first slide we created, and I'll have to give credit to Jonathan Craycraft, my assistant. He's very well versed in Excel, and he's created all these slides and comparisons. So I appreciate all the work he's done to get to this point. But just kind of a couple of brief things. So this is comparison to the 2020 budget, the 2021-2020 budget. There's an increase in revenue, about $22 million. Most of that is from the additional funding, the $13 million that we've gotten from the CARES Act with the community development side of it. So, and that'll be again the increase in expense. So, because it's a reimbursement style reimbursement grants. So whatever we expend, we will receive back from HUD. And then we have an increase in the actual HAP payments, $3 million. For rental assistance that we're projecting, just due to the COVID-related interims that we've had, and then we're having to pay ask HUD for a larger portion of the rents for the HAP vouchers, and then a 1.5% OCAF adjustment, operating cost adjustment factor for the PBRA properties increases the revenue about 4.1%. So this shows again that we just kind of an overview of the revenue and profit and expense in a comparison situation. So the next slide is the revenue by category, which gets to what Mr. Harbison's summary kind of really talked about is you see where our revenue sources come from. Again, it's the housing assistant payment income, and that is for the rental assistance vouchers that are paid to the landlords in the rental assistance program, and then the PBRA contracts that we get on all of our MDHA managed properties. So it just kind of gives you an overview of the comparison from one budget to the next. Again, the big increases are the HAP and then the grant revenues. Everything else pretty much stayed pretty consistent.
Melinda, can you just help me understand, why is our other rental income slightly declined?
Well, what happened this year, and we're projecting it into next year, is we can't charge late fees to the tenants anymore. So that's been pretty significant this year in the amount of income, other tenant income that we've received. So I think that was the majority of it, wasn't it, Jonathan? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
And why is our interest income cut in half?
Our interest income that we have, our agreement with Pinnacle Bank is a certain percentage above whatever the Fed rate is, with a floor of a 0.42%. And so in the past year, last year we were riding high, in a 1.17% on the amount of money in our bank, and now we're at 0.42. So we're projecting that going into next year. And again, what Mr. Harbison said, we project, conservatively, and hopefully we'll do better than that. We can better that, but that's why.
Got it. So the amount of money that they're managing has remained the same. The yield that we get on the money is going down.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Slide is expense by category. Again, this kind of mirrors the revenue that we get in. So you see where the tall green towers are the program expenses, which includes the HAP payments to the landlords, and then the program expenses that we have for our community development grants. So that kind of mirrors, again, the revenue. A couple of things that I was looking at. Again, Mr. Harbison kind of discussed everything. Everything's pretty much in line, except for like the administrative expenses increased slightly from the prior year's budget, and it was increased positions, and we're carrying about 34 vacant positions in our budget for next year. So worst case scenario is of all 34 of those positions filled October 1st, that would be a whole year's worth of salaries and fringe for the year. But as we know, that's not going to happen. So we carry those for a full year, but we know that, we have some play in there with the admin expenses. Another reason the admin expenses budgeted increase is when our HAP money increases on the PBRA side, then that increases the amount of money that we can take for a management fee for the central office. So that's included in the admin expenses also. Any questions on expense by category comparison specifically?
You have two questions, Melinda. Is the insurance and metro property taxes line item that's kind of going up by $1.2 million or so? Is that insurance costs, or is that property tax costs? Combination of both? And where do we have it?
Insurance cost. What happens is we have, for all of our MDHA owned properties, we're in the Tennessee risk pool for public housing agencies. As we add more LIHTC properties that are owned by investor partners and different entities, those insurance expenses are quite a bit higher than the MDHA owned property expenses. So, maybe 3 times, 4 times higher. So as we add, different projects, then they take on that insurance expense. So that's why. And plus we did have a kind of recast the amount of replacement value this year for the MDHA properties, I think, because they had several losses last year, specifically in Memphis, I think, and And Jim Filchin can speak to that, but he's the expert on insurance. But this year they upped the amount of replacement value for each of our units. So this year we kind of handled that this year during the mid-year budget review, and kind of handle it with other expenses that weren't that had not been increased. So it was kind of a zero effect, but we were projecting that for next year.
And so does the developers of these low income these third party owned, so as the insurance rates go up because their programs come, do they reimburse us for that change in insurance? Like, why are we carrying the cost for them?
We manage the properties. So like Mosley on 6, we're the manager. So we carry that expense in our budget. We have to budget for that expense, and it's included in our agency budget. Got it. So we collect the revenue and we carry the expense. Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Okay.
On the 34 positions that are open, why do we bake it in that we're going to hire these people? Because this is the second year in a row that I've heard we've had a significant number of kind of sort of open positions in the agency. Like, do we go through a process of saying, do we even need to hire 34 new people? Like, I mean, again, I'm just simply asking the question is from an efficiency perspective, I would never run a business and say, well, I'm going to keep programming for more people, but I still keep getting 99% on my HUD scores. I keep getting 100% A pluses and A pluses and A pluses and A pluses. And I would say, well, if I can achieve a 99% performance factor at a $5 million savings, so this is what they say, I would say, well, why would I set my target to continue to get 99% performance and all the great scores and all the great accolades and do it at $5 million less?
And we have that discussion as part of the budget. So let me talk about first about the target. And if we were in business, pure business, you're exactly right. I wouldn't be in front of a board of investors that's going to get a dividend off of what I cash flow, and I'd be accused of basically sandbagging a budget. I think that would be the terms you'd use. We include them in there. As I said, we're very conservative in what we want to project as our cash flow, because we use that cash flow in the separate development budget that we present to you. We presented not too long ago, and if we overshoot, we can misplan in the future. So that concept bleeds into being a very conservative approach, and we do budget at 100% of spaces. What's interesting as you go back, the turnover isn't consistent. So one year we have a shortage in maintenance techs and senior techs, typically are a challenge, but sometimes we have leasing assistants and rental assistants. And so it's not a consistent 34 positions. You can go through and do a reduction in force and decrease the structure of the team. On the personnel side, in terms of structure, spaces, there's really no consistent place to drop people except for a harder look at our maintenance. And that's why we've got Jones Lang Cassell looking at it. And then on the faces side, it's just tough to recruit and keep people in this, at least last year, and not right now in COVID, but prior to COVID, it was tough because especially in the trades, tradesmen are at a premium in the high value construction market. And that turnover has been a bit of a challenge for us. So first answer I want to offer is the purpose of the NOI is really, of the cash flow is to serve as a planning tool for our development program, because it's not returned as a profit really anywhere else in the agency. So we want to be conservative in that planning. One way to do that is to plan as if you're getting 100% of your people hired against your structure after you've done a structure review, which we did. And then if you could predict what positions turned over and weren't really needed, you could do a little bit of a RIF, but we really, going back and past looked at this, it's very difficult to do that because there's no consistent place. In other words, the maintenance tech at Casey isn't always short. It just happens to be a churn across the portfolio in that skill set. So I hope that answers. Does that answer your question?
No, not really.
Okay.
What I'm simply saying is, year over year, we present outstanding performance, number one in the country, number one best, great accolades. But then every year, conservatism in forecasting and setting performance targets for the agency, I feel like aren't actually the same thing. So I'm saying, Jim, I would say the challenge to the executive team is let's go achieve 99 and let's go add another $5 million back, right, to free cash flow, because at $250,000 a unit, right? There's 20 new units, 250 times, 4 times $5 million, right? That's 20 new affordable housing units. That's 20 new, like we should be setting it as a performance target for ourselves in order to generate more free cash flow that can go back into creating more affordable housing, right? So I'm saying from a performance that this is what we're going to do, team. We're going to get a 99 again, and we're not going to hire anybody else. How do we do that? Like, do we cross-train people? I'm saying, how are we, that's the part I'm trying to drive at.
And I follow your logic, and let me take a look at that. But basically, you're talking about if I understand it, decreasing the structure or decreasing the manning. So if we plan to man at 95% of people against the structure, that would yield more money available that would flow to the cash flow, or you just cut your structure and not have the position. We've looked at the positions. We think they're valid to do what we're doing as an agency.
But why do you think that at 99% performance? Like, because it feels like you're spending way too much money to achieve a diminishing return.
Well, another thing, like just within the finance department specifically, we've asked for 2 new positions because of all the different projects that we've got coming on board, like mostly, and it's a lot more reporting, the requirement is. So those are 2 positions in finance right there that we've asked for just because of all the extra projects that we've got going on, the LIHTC projects. It's a lot more complicated than just the normal PBRA management of it. So as we move forward into the development of these different mixed income type developments, I think we need extra positions, like just within Casey, the management of Casey, the maintenance. Now they have Kirkpatrick, Mosley, Manning,
and they had
Barrett,
and they had no structure.
Yeah, and Barrett and just regular Casey, maintaining Casey. So, or Boxville Heights. So that's one of the examples, just from our standpoint.
We'll take a look.
But again, I'm not here to try to run each department by department, but at a high level board perspective. We do absolutely gut busting performance, and we do it year over year over year. It's recognized by HUD, it's recognized, it's espoused by the executive team and staff, and we do it all the time. And we do it at numbers that are significantly less than what we suggest we need to hit that number again for next year. So I'm simply asking, right? Are we being critical enough of ourselves and saying why and how do we achieve that same performance while not adding additional expense into the portfolio? Because if our revenue relatively remains the same, it gives us more money to build new affordable and obtain more and new affordable housing units. That's it.
I agree, and and so we'll take a look at it. And I don't want to get anybody wobbly on this, but we haven't yet been graded on project-based rental assistance. We've been graded on public housing. I'm confident we're going to do well, but those first grades on management occupancy reviews and others, we're going to have to see how they pan out. And our REACTS, real estate assessment center scores for our facilities. We haven't had any of those yet under PBRA because we just finished the RAD conversion in December. So there might be an apples and oranges there. I don't think there is. But I agree. We want the money, and the money does exist. It just gets into how you do your projections. And as you're spot on, and we're planning on developments now 2 years out. So we're looking at this fund as an amount of money to be sourced to help us close loans and LIHTCs to build more within largely the Envision program. And if it's 6 million instead of 5 million, that puts more units on the table. So we'll take a look at that and go back again. We go through property by property. We scrub the positions. We quiz the property managers on what they need. And it's largely the properties where most of our staff are, roughly 200 or so, are in the affordable housing portfolio. And certain areas like finance desperately need some help because now they're managing LIHTC, new market tax credits, as well as HUD insured loans that we weren't really doing just 3 years ago. So that some of the structure growth I think was justified. We'll take another look.
Yeah, Jim, if I could just speak to that. Number one, I have a gap in my knowledge and understanding exactly what criteria these HUD evaluations have. I don't know those criteria, and it'll be good to know the criteria under the new RAD program so that we can understand that, because that's a key point here. The other point is knowing the layered and the complexity of the projects that are going to be coming on board. I certainly appreciate the need for the right kind of folks in finance with the knowledge and experience you need to handle those additional challenges and handle those well. So all this to say, I'm seeing both sides of the coin, but I just need more knowledge in my knowledge bank to have a better understanding of it.
Okay, well, we'll add that. I think it'd be good for the board. Just to reassure everyone, prior to me coming here, I was the director of these programs for the federal government for HUD. The two people that ran this in the state of Tennessee for project-based rental assistance, the entire program, was Julia Moss and Will Biggs, and they ran it with high marks across HUD successfully. And they worked for me back at HUD. They ran this program for the state successfully for over 15 years. So we hired away the two best from HUD to come here to run our program. That's why I'm pretty confident Julia already has a training program, internal, going property by property, prepare them for management occupancy review, which is the equivalent of what we used to do in public, what was in public housing, of getting a tenant file inspection. Your financial inspection is a process. It falls under the rules of the project-based rental assistance and multifamily section of HUD. And the REAG standards are the same standards as public housing. They're just applied slightly differently. We're training that now. And that's why I feel pretty good about it. We'll take a look at our structure to make sure that we haven't, if we have some places we can trim a little bit, we'll take a look at that. But I'll put down a list of things for the board to follow up on how we do management occupancy reviews under project-based rental assistance and the REACT program. We have an internal inspection program. Will has a full-time compliance inspector that teaches and does internal inspections with Julia for all our properties, and I think we just haven't gotten one yet. So I think we'll be fine, but we're preparing for it. So
that's right. Yeah. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting I didn't use the word RIF, right?
No,
I didn't use the word reduced force. I didn't suggest that we should be getting rid of people, but a 25% increase in budget year over year, wow, feels really heavy in light of our performance. That's the comment.
Understand. Got it.
Are you speaking to because that was my question, the 25% increase in program expenses from this year to next year?
A majority of that was, again, I think Mr. Harbison touched on it on his summary, is the 13 million we're projecting. We've gotten the new additional funding we got from the CARES Act and the community development program. So that's the majority of it. And then the rental, the $3 million we're anticipating for the rental assistance program to pay landlords. So that's the majority of the program.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide, our last slide, is the profit by fiscal year. And this is where we added in the comparison from prior year to this year and budget in blue, and then the projected actual based on the, it was based on the July, right? Our July closeout of the agency and our internal financials. So we are projecting actually a $7.2 million net profit next for this year versus the $6 million in budget. So that's kind of what Mr. Harbison was talking about being conservative and, hoping for the best. So,
And in terms of development planning, the way our process works, which I touched on in my write-up, we'll finish the audit. So we'll close out this fiscal year in September. It'll end in September. We'll close the book sometime October, November. The auditors come in, and once they finish their audit and they validate how much cash flow we have, then we do a thing called sweep. We basically go to the program funds where these extra cash flows exist, as cut, and then we sweep these funds into our unrestricted accounts. And we're projecting, and we're using the actual figures for our development planning for next year. So in a sense, we're working more off actuals than we are budget, but Ayla's point's well taken, and we should probably look and see about tightening more efficient projections on manpower and structure. But in terms of handicapping or losing units in a development program, I don't think we're doing that. I don't think we have any risk of that, because we've got very accurate and continual actual projections that flow into the next cash sweep, which the next big one is going to be April. We'll sweep in April. So we'll sweep in April of next year those funds from this year that we made. And a like token, in April roughly of 2022, we'll sweep those funds then with use for planning at some point in time after that. I think we've got enough room in the time sequencing that it doesn't handicap us and lose units, so to speak, in our development program.
and I think that was the last, the slide on the comparison. So if there's, is there any other questions or anything that we need to take for record and get back to you on?
Just one, I just have one, what properties or projects does Freeman Webb manage? Are they just the manager for the LIHTC properties?
They manage several. They manage both the properties on Roller Mill Hill, Ryman Lofts, Uptown Flats. They manage urban flats.
Nance Place in Ryman.
Nance Place in Ryman. I'm sorry, urban flats is right down the street here. And then they've got 10th and Jefferson. Those are the main ones. There's a couple of Convisor
and Lenore, just right down the street.
Lenore,
and then they like five units
five single
Georgia
units
Core that's
in
over
Georgia
in
Courts.
Preston Taylor. So
total is about 500 units. I have to get that count.
probably
It's right at 500 units, I'm guessing. We can get that number for you.
Okay.
So I would just like to briefly touch upon how we're going to be moving forward with viewing our financials and keeping track of them. One thing that would be on my wish list with a budget like this is that we actually think about integrating some of the things that are being covered, for lack of a better word, our bathtub chart. And I was interested in seeing a balance sheet accompany our profit and our income statement, where basically we could just understand, when we're looking at this budget, for what do we actually have on our balance sheet, and then what are we forecasting? And so that is something that in the future I'd love to be able to either meet with Jim or Melinda about in terms of putting in place. I think that would be very helpful. And then next on the list is, and I think that this goes to what your concern, Aoli, is, making sure that whether it's on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, getting this kind of information with budget to actuals, and really understanding what percentage of our budget, are we at that point in time, to see if we are anticipating additional cost savings, and if we are staffing up, what is it doing for the budget, or for our actual expenses. So I'd like to hear from other commissioners at this point. What is your, what feels like the right level of reviewing these financials? Do we want to be seeing them at a monthly finance committee meeting? Does quarterly feel appropriate for us?
Well, for me, for my purposes, quarterly is often enough. However, I would also like to have beside the P&L budget, the balance sheet, so that we have both of those documents together to look at.
Paulette, you're on mute. I think you're speaking.
Pay attention. Thank you. On most boards whose finances are not as complex, it's monthly. And I'm very comfortable with that. And until we get all of the answers that we're looking for, I'd rather see either monthly or bi-monthly. But I'd like to see something more frequently than quarterly until we're all comfortable with where we are. I think having the profit and loss and the balance sheet would be helpful, but I also want to know how they're going to look together and how easy it is to grasp the information.
Melinda, I also want to be not causing undue burden to our finance team. So I'd love to hear from your perspective if doing a budget to actual and preparing a balance sheet is something that's doable for your team in a relatively short period of time, if this is something that potentially could be a companion to our approval of the budget or not.
Well, we just completed, we do quarterly financials. We roll up like the roll-up sheet that I presented with all the programs. We do those quarterly. So we do have the June 30th, balance sheet and income statement rolled up for the entity that shows all the programs. Now, monthly, Jonathan has created and provides to affordable housing and the managers and seniors a P&L budget to actual comparison for each property that they review monthly. So we have that side of it monthly that we prepare and provide to affordable housing, which obviously from our budget is the most important part of the bathtub chart as far as the suite for next year, because they're the ones that are creating the cash flow for the envisioning projects. So we have that already in place. So anything else that, and we also have to do a monthly financial, just from our internal Yardi system and GL, monthly reports to the LIHTC equity partners and the Walker and Dunlap that services our HUD loans for the Kirkpatrick and 10th and Jefferson and Madison Towers. There's one more. So I think that, yeah, so we have those that we do. But other than that, I mean, anything else we would just need to incorporate and figure out, what would work for you guys so that that we're using our time wisely and it's a useful document for you. So
I would ask the board to consider what decisions you're going to change in a budget and how frequently you're going to change them. Because I've then got to run an agency to react to them. We have property managers, we have senior property managers, we have a great affordable housing director. That's where most of any opportunity to affect any change in this budget exists. And that's operational expense control, which we've worked really hard at and will continue to do so. And we can probably hire a couple more people or create something to feed you if that's helpful. But help me understand how that's going to change what decision-making we see on a strategic level for an annual budget that will occur on a monthly basis. I need to understand that in order to execute and direct the agency on, if you're changing things on a monthly basis, I'll be changing things much more frequently than that, and that's going to cause a churn for the staff and make it more difficult to execute.
Jim, I don't know if that's the right question, because I think that as a board, our job is to be fiscal agents for the organization. And so while it may not be that the result is that we are going to radically shift what is happening or, asking for massive budget cuts or changes, which would make your life very difficult, I think it's really to ensure that we are doing good governance. And following where the money is going in terms of where our expenses are going, and making sure that we are staying in step with the organizational decisions that being made and the very understandable changes as we're moving from public housing to PBRA. I think that it's really just more to make sure that we are with you.
Well, and certainly I agree with that. I would just offer, you were talking, I think, about compliance. Most of these funds can't be used for anything other than their statutory purpose. So there's no wiggle room in the budget on what you do with your program money. It just has to go to program. And we can report that. And we have a very strong internal compliance regime. And you do have a full audit that comes in and does a third party that provides that assurance that the monies are being spent appropriately, that there's no use of funds that are outside of what you approved as a budget. So I'd offer that as the existing control mechanisms that have been very successful for quite some time. We'll, of course, respond to whatever the board wants, and if there's going to be additional reports on a more frequent basis, we will generate them.
I think part of the desire is a need to understand, to seek to understand, so that we can better respond to things, or have more of a comfort level, for folks to have more of a comfort level with the finances of this complex agency. I don't think it's, I agree with Emily, it's not going to be a situation where we're going to recommend changes or big changes, or we wouldn't, but it's simply my sense is it's simply to give people a higher level of understanding and comfort. And the way to do that seems to be right now is through the frequent reporting. I don't have a need to see things monthly. Other people might. Quarterly is fine for me, and I can go get questions answered if I need to. But my sense is that's just it. Because as fiscal agents, under our responsibility, it just falls on us to have a comfort level with understanding that, and then when we make decisions, to feel confident in those decisions.
I would also say it's about making sure that, for me, all the questions are answered regarding the fiduciary responsibility that boards have. And it's not always easy to get the questions answered. And sometimes the information that is presented is not as comprehensible or graspable as perhaps we would like. And I think the realities of the excellence of compliance, the excellence of reporting are fine and wonderful, but we still have 7 individuals who have to have a comfort level that, allows us to fulfill our responsibilities.
So with that, I think, so it sounds like, Melinda, it's very possible to provide a balance sheet, if I'm hearing you correctly. And so I think that that's a first request, is to make sure that we have a balance sheet available to the board. And I understand that it might not be possible in a short period of time to do a projected balance sheet. Do I have that right? Would you need more time for that? You're on mute.
I'm sorry. So I'm just going to clarify what you're asking. So we have a rolled up entity-wide balance sheet that we prepared for June 30th. So, but you're talking about, a projected balance sheet. I'm not sure. You're talking about, is that the bathtub chart you're talking about, or?
Right. It's basically to try to integrate when we're looking at the balance sheet and getting a sense of the bathtub chart. If we can try to have them speak in kind of the same language and go together, that would be something I think that would be very helpful.
And you would like that monthly or quarterly? I'm sorry.
That is something I think just when we are presenting the annual budget, It would be a good point in time for us to be able to review that so that we can contextualize our budget. And so I understand that this is a request coming late. And so I'm not trying to make this stand in the way of us approving or recommending approval to the full board for this budget in September. But I just wanted to find out what would be possible to provide in the next month related to that.
So first, the bathtub chart, as we call it, is not a financial document. It's a pure planning tool. It's not a balance sheet. It's just a planning tool of funding opportunities against development desires so that we can plan and project. It includes things like a 4% LIHTC, which we haven't received yet. We're getting in January. We provided that twice this year, once at the board retreat, once since, and Buck in development runs that, but it's a projected planning tool that's largely development. I would hesitate to call it a balance sheet. So we can provide that, and I intended to provide that. And if you look at the last spreadsheet, when we provided in October the plan for Envision Casey, which you requested, that's where that chart, that planning tool next comes into play. Part of the figures in there are plugged in estimated figures of cash flow year over year, and they're planning figures. So we have an estimated cash flow figure for fiscal year 23, but it's based on historical performance. And we tighten those plans up as we get closer. So I intended to include that in the development side. It's not per se a financial tool. It's more it's a planning tool for us to make sure that we are at least in the realms of feasibility for our planning with good assumptions of what we think we can do in the future. But we can certainly provide that more frequently. It's just understand that it changes. We just want a 9% LIHTC, right? And we didn't get the full value we planned on. We got a partial value, so we adjust our planning. Those are the plans that come into effect 7 months from now. Some of these plans, it's not really what I call a balance sheet, which reflects the financial posture of the agency. But we can do a balance sheet too. So balance sheet and a monthly comparison at the top-end level, like I did. So we can do that.
So can I recommend? Can I recommend? Can I recommend this? So I think we're kind of mixing two things. So in September, we have to actually vote on the budget, right? That is the pressing matter in front of us, is that the executive staff has said, here's our proposed budget for fiscal year 2021, and I'm giving you a preview today. Next month, I'm going to ask you to approve this budget. So the question, Jim, I'd be asking is, board members, what do you need between now and next September, right, to get you comfortable approving the budget? So I think that's a very discrete thing in time based on where we are, right? And so if that were the first question, right, Jim might be saying, Emily, do you want to see a bathtub chart as a part of your process to approve the budget in September? Do you want to see a balance sheet of wherever we think we are right now in order to approve the budget in September? And if the answer is yes, you just got to give it to her or me or whomever that is, because it's about just actually approving the budget in September and having everybody comfortable with what we just saw being approved. So I would say, let's just start with that piece.
Madam Chair, can you?
Bill, yes, we can hear you.
I think, first of all, I want to thank the Finance Committee and the Development Committee, but both chairs, both for the conversation we've had so far, but also for the work that went into it. And we'll come back to the thanks, and there'll be more thanks at the board meeting. For Jim, let me just ask one quick background question. The long sheet that came late to us, described as budget totals MDHA entity-wide, right? Is that previously been presented?
Sorry, there's Paulette, would you mind muting? We're getting a lot of background noise. And Bill, will you repeat your question? Sorry.
Sure. But there's a long sheet that came in a second delivery, and it's 2021 budget totals MDHA entity-wide. I believe, is that the document that has been presented to previous boards?
Yes, that's the only document we presented to previous boards.
So for the committees and then ultimately for the board, if you will compare what all previous boards apparently, and I guess both Emily and Aoli were present, and Kay maybe, it is extraordinary where you have taken us from one sheet to the presentation that we just had, and I want to be both thankful and encouraging to everyone involved in the progress that we've made in getting the information that we need. I don't know how we could have had the conversation that we've just had, or even begin to answer Commissioner Ansari's question had you not gotten this additional information. I want to refine slightly Commissioner Ansari's question and ask it this way. What do we need in order to approve this budget in this year in the full board? And as a first question, which leads to the second question, then what do we need in addition to that we might not be able to obtain? I'd like to make some suggestions and see, begin to answer that question, at least for me, and see what the committees would like to do. I think that, first of all, Madam Chair, your point about the two memos back to back was my feeling exactly. I very much appreciated both the Executive Director and Carolyn's reports, but I think having those two things together before the first board meeting would be useful, so that they're a document that is self-contained and self-explanatory within the larger document, as opposed to two memos, one attached to the other. I think that the information in the second document is critically important and typically information that most of us have had, meaning a budget presentation slide contains not only the year 2021, but also the year 2020, the present budget year. And in some cases, actually, one finds, and the committees might decide they would like, easily presented, where were we in 2019, what was it in 2020, and what was it in 2021, so that when you look quickly at the slide, you're in a position to actually see the trend lines over time. I'm informed as well by the profit slide, the projected profit slide that we saw. In the projected profit slide, it had not only the budget number, but the projected actual number, and then the number for next year, so that we would know at this time all that we need to know. It may not be possible to have projections for every category before passage of the budget. I understand that, but I would like to say, beginning to answer for me, Commissioner Ansari's question would be, as soon as we can, in September, October, or November, whenever we have the numbers, to have before us the 2021 budget, the 2020 budget, the 2020 actuals, and the 2021 budget, so that we can, early in the budget year, see where we thought we were going to be, see where we ended up, and then what we had planned to do for 2021 before we knew for sure where 2020 had landed. That's in essence the slide we saw on profits, but in essence it becomes several columns, simply budget, actual, and the next year. And that's something that, as you do projections moving through the year, may be useful as often as you can produce it. I think, again, Commissioner Ansari's question about personnel numbers are worthy of a deeper dive. And that may be in the Human Resources Committee in the next quarter. It may be by the full board, depending on your desire or interest in that regard. We haven't done that. I think it's an important question. There are similar budgetary categories in the city and state, similar benchmarks and numbers maintained in terms of there's plenty of public entities that we can make comparisons to and make a determination about. But I think it's, for me at least, I put it just to the side for the moment, but I think it's worthy of looking at since we have not had a chance to do that yet as a board. And at that time, we could also look, obviously, at defining the salaries and benefits and trending those over time as we look at them. I do think it's in the budget document that we have, it would be useful to have the insurance and tax issues, and this was another question earlier. I think those, even now, before the next budget presentation, could be broken out. I think those two things are they're in the same category, but they're different, and we ought to see those numbers separated in the chart. What's the insurance and what that's something we're paying for our own protection. The tax issue is a separate issue, and we ought to be aware if that number moves around in the near term. So for me, first, I'm incredibly thankful for the work that both chairs and every member of finance have done to get us to a point where we can have a conversation like we're having now, and what I believe will lead to richer and better conversations and understanding about profit and loss, capital investment, all the questions that have been on our minds for the time we've been together anyway. But for me, before the full board takes this up, I think, and I defer to the committee, I think it would be useful for us to be in a position to look at the charts that we have now with a few refinements, at least the one that I described concerning insurance and taxes, and then also the 2020 numbers sitting side by side with the 2021 numbers at the time we look at the budget as a full Board of Commissioners.
That's right, Bill, and thank you for those clarifications. And I guess the simplest way for me to say it is that if this were presented to me next September, I would not vote to approve this budget. Right?
Understood.
So I would not vote to approve this budget as presented. And so what I'm trying to get to is I think part of what we're trying to do as a board is to bring these things up earlier so we can actually do those things. And so when we get to December, we do pass. We do pass a budget that we agree with. So I agree with you 100%. And I would say, based on what I've seen today, if this is all we had between now and the September budget vote, I wouldn't vote to approve this budget.
Okay.
I can't hear anything. Oh.
Well, a quick question. Then may I ask one question, Madam Chair? The quick question is, do you, and we discussed this as a board, and I think the agency is prepared, would you like to basically recess this meeting and convene again as a committee in a week or two so that you can have the information that you want prior to approving it to go before the full board? Or would you prefer to move it to the full board, but be clear about what you want before the full board votes next month? We've specifically set this structure up so that there would be time for finance to adjourn, recess in essence, and then reconvene with an opportunity for one-on-ones as needed between the agency and commissioners, but then also to have additional information provided. And again, I think that's just a question of the will of the committee. I'm comfortable either way.
I think the question goes to Melinda and Jim. Have we provided enough clarity for you all to provide us with additional information at our next finance committee meeting so that then we can vote in September?
I recommend that we be very specific on what our expectations are in terms of further deliveries in order to approve the budget. So I think we should just make sure we capture all those things one more time.
Okay, my understanding at this point is that there's the request to see the balance sheet. There is the request for a breakdown table of insurance and taxes. And that we are seeing, Bill, you might have to clarify for me if you want to see more in terms of the budget to actuals on the charts.
Thank you. First, on the document that's called 2021 budget totals, MDHA entity-wide broken up, which is vertical, I would like to have the 2021 numbers as budgeted set side by side with the 2021 numbers. And frankly, if it's not, again, will of the committee, but I wouldn't mind looking at 2019, 2020, and 2021 side by side. Those should be fairly easy numbers to pull. I think they sit there in our system, and we ought to be able to put those together, I think, but I defer to Jim about that. I will say that the second memo does a nice job of setting those numbers from 20 against 2021, although I'm not sure that it's in a category. I like the Excel spreadsheets, but I also would like the ability to look at the numbers just vertically side by side, and that's in that sheet. The extent to which, on the actual issue, I think we need to have Jim tell us what kind of actuals do we have. For profit, obviously, we've projected actuals through the end of the year already. Have we projected for the other categories? If we have projected for those other categories, it's probably useful for us to know the projection at this point. Budget 2020, projected for 2020, and then 2021. If we have those three numbers, I think we would have a high level of confidence going into this next year about where we were and where we were expecting to be. If we don't have the projected at this time in all categories, I think they should advise us where they have them and then at least provide what we have.
I agree.
Before Jim responds, do we have any other? So far we've got the insurance versus taxes, the balance sheet, and the comparison of 2019, 2020 budget, 2020 projected, and 2021. Is there anything else that commissioners would like to see before they feel comfortable enough to approve the budget?
The only thing I would ask is, so I would just take it. I think what Mayor Purcell highlighted is exactly what we need to see, because we're only approving the operating budgets. We don't approve profits, right? Because we don't know where they don't come up until the end of the year. We're only approving the budgets or revenue forecasts against a line item of expenses. The only thing that I would add is that we have a variance column between 20 and 21. There should be a variance line item. And for any variance that's above 5%, we need to explain that if it's above 5%. So, Emily, I'll defer to you, but I might ask, in the work that we're simply trying to do before September, if we could just get that in the next 2 weeks, right? I don't think our balance sheet materially changes based on the budget forecasts for this year. Because our balance sheet should technically only change by the amount of money we deposit at the end of the year, or any asset sale or disposition, or any financing transaction.
Yes, I completely agree. I think it's for context setting, right? It's helpful in that way. And so if we literally have it sitting there, then, why not provide it? But I am in complete agreement. I think that having that information and the explanations related to variance, it's really an opportunity for staff to educate the board members, and I think we'll learn a lot from that.
Emily, so if we could have Saul go over line by line exactly what information we want before the next finance meeting. I think it's down to like 3 or 4 items. Let's just go over it detail by detail, so it's very clear. This is all we're asking of the staff to do for us, so that we'll be in a position where we feel like we can vote at the next meeting. So Saul, would you do that?
Yes. Okay. I'll try to do it in level of maybe criticality, but the basic summary, the vertical summary sheet that was provided in the first package, called 2021 budget totals, MDHA entity-wide, is going to be, the request was at 2019, 2020 budget, 2020 projected, and 2021 basically side by side. In connection with that, I'm not sure exactly how much detail Commissioner Ansari wants on this, but if it's just these categories, he wants to see a 20 versus 21, I assume both budget and projected on 20. If there's any variance more than 5% between the 20 budget / actual and 21, there should be some explanation. The third item was the balance sheet, which makes sense to provide and should be fairly easily done. The fourth item was to break out on the expense line insurance versus taxes, separate those two out.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, did you also want the salary and benefits number broken out from the larger category, or is that something we could wait for and when we get to personnel?
No, I don't think we need to get this. I think it'll be very clear when you show 20 million versus 26 and the variance of more than 5%, there'll be an explanation. I think that'll be very clear.
Okay.
Sorry, I think something here. I think the wording wasn't quite right. I think Melinda should speak up right now and talk about, I think you were using the word projected when we were actually meaning actual. Melinda?
We can meet all 4 tasks. Look forward to it.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we are understanding each other. All right. So with that, I think that if there's no additional business, we can adjourn the Finance and Development Committee meeting and look forward to receiving the additional material so that we can have a vote at our next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Before we adjourn, when is the next meeting, Madam Chair?
I believe it's the Thursday before the September board meeting.
Good. I'm totally comfortable with that. I just wanted to, again, just highlight it. If you want something sooner, it's within the power of the chairs to have that. If you want to convene again as a committee prior to that. I'm very sensitive to the fact that as I came into the board, there was a real feeling in finance that they didn't always have enough time between committee and board meeting. But if you're comfortable that we've done enough work today and that we can await the meeting in September, then I'm comfortable with that as well. But I just wanted to give you maximum ability to convene as committees in the interim. If you have that right, and I wanted to emphasize that if that's how you feel, I'm good either way. But I want you to make sure you consider that.
I appreciate that. I am comfortable enough, but Paulette, I see you're trying to speak, and I want to make sure that other board members are comfortable with that.
So the committee will not make a recommendation to the board for approving the budget.
We would do that in September at our next committee meeting, which will be the Thursday before the board meeting.
Okay.
Are people comfortable with that, or do we need additional time?
I'm comfortable with that.
So Emily, can we just get an agreement with the team to figure out the information that Saul just highlighted? When will that be provided? Like, can that be provided in a week?
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Got it. Okay. Perfect. Well, yeah, if we have this information in 2 weeks, that's more than enough time that if you read it, review it, to reach out to Jim on your own because you feel like it's important enough to do that, then that gives us plenty of time before the next meeting. And so I would agree with you that our regular schedule should work.
Excellent.
I just point out that the 19 data is going to be somewhat apples and oranges, largely apples and oranges, because you were in the middle of a rental assistance demonstration conversion from public housing, and half the portfolio was public housing, maybe more, to rental assistance, project-based rental assistance contracts. So there'll be some variance there that will be difficult to explain and may not be useful for your assessments of whether you approve this budget or not.
Right, but the variance is only between 2020 and 2021. It's not for 2019.
Unknown caller. Unknown caller.
And you still want 19 data then as well?
I believe that was the request for 19 data, but the variance is only between 20 and 21. So,
Correct.
so we don't expect any written explanation about the differences between total rental income in 2019 and total rental income in 2021. We do not expect any explanation from the team for that.
Okay, at the risk of being a dead horse, do we want to do the variance for, I guess the first question is, will we have 2020 projections for all the categories that are of interest to the commissioners? And if so, I would imagine the variance analysis should be done on projection versus budget. Would that be right, Commissioner? As opposed to budget versus 20 budget versus 21 budget.
So when will we have 2020 actuals?
When 2020 ends, we'll have projections for 2020 in 2 weeks at every category.
Okay.
We'll have actual
Perfect.
2020 after we close the fiscal year sometime in the fall.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, now Matt Wilshire, there are some chats back and forth where I might have misspoke. Has this been straightened out now, Matt?
I'll defer to Commissioner Coleman on this. I believe I understood what you said and it reflected what was desired.
Okay, thank you.
So long as he said that we are getting, yeah, he said it correctly because we don't have the actuals for 2020. So he said it correctly, correct. That's right.
Okay, excellent. And with that, I'd really love to adjourn this meeting.
I move to adjourn.
Excellent. And Kay, I see we have a second. So with that, this meeting can be adjourned if we are all in favor. All right. Thank you very much. And I believe we have, and I think we do need to do the Human Resources Committee meeting now, or can we do that on the morning of the board meeting?
We'll do it in the morning of the board meeting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. And we really do appreciate all of the great work of the staff. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Ansari, be well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.